And I'm just going to just keep rolling here and go right ahead and initiate that session. This, as the title implies, is really talking about how architects across the globe are really working to address this 1.5 degree imperative. And they are working on it. They are achieving what needs to be achieved to really meet the 1.5 degree target. And that's, I think, incredibly exciting. And also something that I think is, extremely pertinent to our mission here today, to really helping people understand that it is not just a why, but also that we can and how to go about doing it. And throughout the Americas and throughout the world, architects are charged with being the ones who set the direction of projects, certainly not alone, but play a leadership role in that. And then also in coordinating the teams that actually make it happen. So we're going to spend the next few minutes really talking about the role that architects really need to play in this. And it means all architects, no matter what your firm size is or whether you're a local practice or international practice. So we have today 3 firm leaders who really represent that spectrum of practice and that spectrum of firm sizes. So our panel today will handle the way that we handled previously. We'll start with brief presentations by each of them, followed by Q&A. And our 3 panelists are, as you see on your screen, Marsha Maytum, co-founder of Leddy, Maytum, Stacy Architects in San Francisco, a modest size firm of about 30 staff. By the way, the 2017 AIA Architecture Firm Award winner. And also Marsha was the 2019 Committee on the Environment Chair. Also with us then is Keith Hempel, AIA. He's principal and design director for LPA Design Studios. LPA is located in both Texas and California in the US, with 6 offices and 400 plus staff. So a power of 10 size difference there. And then last but not least with us today is Rives Taylor, AIA, who's a principal and the Global Resilience Research Leader at Gensler. And I'm sure that you all know Gensler, global practices, all offices all around the Americas, Europe, Middle East, China, and Asia, and Pacific, with over 6,000. Rives was also a co-leader of Gensler's City Climate Change Initiative, their GC3 initiative. So we have 3 really great panelists with us here today. And with that, Marsha, I'm going to hand it over to you for the first presentation. Marsha, welcome.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Carl. And the question, as you pose, is for our panelists: how do we, as architects, at all scales of practice, reach the carbon goals that Ed has set out our challenge to meet? I'm representing the mid-sized firm, as Carl mentioned. We're a 35-person firm in San Francisco with a diverse group of architects and designers united around the idea that architecture can help lead the way to a just, healthy, and regenerative future. Next slide, please, Lindsay. Today, we're here to talk about transforming practice at all scales. We're at a critical moment in history, as we all know, and we have an important role to play in achieving a carbon positive world. These are 3 actions that our firm is focused on. 1, commit to zero net carbon. 2, contribute to environmental and social equity. And 3, advocate for positive change. Next. So first, commit to zero net carbon. Our firm's been involved in sustainable design for nearly 40 years. For me, it began when I was a student of Ed Mazaria at the University of Oregon in the 1970s. Sustainable design is a foundation of our work and on each project. We strive to advance for design excellence, high performance, and low carbon design. Here you see the framework for design excellence that Jane just mentioned. There are many tools we use in our practice as part of our design process, and this is one of them. It's a comprehensive and integrated design and tracking tool that we use in all of our projects in all of the phases of the work. It's comprised of 10 measures ranging from water, energy, ecology, and equitable communities. It's a great organizational and communication design tool, providing clear goals, strategies across all 10 measures. We use this not just internally with our staff, but also with our consultants, our clients, and in community meetings. It's a way to track throughout all phases within our teams and across all of our office work. So zooming in to the next slide, we can see, zooming into measure 8 about resources, which is pertinent to our conversation today. This is a way that we can track both setting goals in the early design phases, but also through the progress of the design work with, again, everybody involved in the project. We can set goals for low carbon concrete, no fossil fuels on site, think about how we specify local and regional materials and rapidly renewable materials, and of course, how we can reuse the buildings and the resources on site. Next, please. As Jane mentioned, tracking and understanding how we're doing in our practice towards these goals is really important. So in our office, we produce these posters for each project, and when we were working in our open studio, these were pinned up all across the office. It's a bit harder now working remotely. But every project, we track the EUI as well as the building performance goals. It provides transparency in process, sharing of knowledge across the studio, and also creates a bit of healthy competition across teams. Next, please. We use this approach both for new buildings, such as this high performance supportive housing project for the formerly homeless at the gateway to downtown San Francisco. And next, the important reuse of existing buildings. Here's an example of that strategy. The adaptive reuse of a landmark Army pier on the San Francisco Bay, transformed into an arts college with integrated renewable energy. This project meets the 2030 commitment goals of 83% energy use reduction, and because of the embodied carbon of the existing structure, results in a 75% reduction in CO2 emissions compared to a similar new project. Next. So as a mid-sized firm, we don't have a sustainability department. We don't have a research and development department. We empower everybody in the office to do this work. And we use our projects as case studies and research opportunities. Here are just a few examples. We worked with our local utility company on a zero net energy pilot project, the Sweetwater Spectrum Community, a national residential model project for adults with autism in Sonoma. We're currently working on a low carbon concrete pilot project, which you'll hear a little bit more about later this afternoon from Francis Yang at Arup. This Berkeley Way project, we just are under construction and have confirmed that our concrete will be using 64% less cement than industry averages. And finally, we've been using a mass timber grant to investigate the use of mass timber on a new community center and city recreation center. Next. As Jane mentioned, the AIA 2030 commitment is really important. We must measure what we value. Our firm is an early signatory firm, and we've been tracking our progress towards zero carbon across our office portfolio for 10 years now, almost 10 years. So here's a snapshot of our firm, according to the different building types that we work in. We are making progress, but there is lots of work left to be done to reach zero carbon. I encourage everybody to check out the AIA 2030 commitment and the website and to report. This data will be an invaluable resource to our profession and beyond. Next. The second action is to contribute to environmental and social equity. Next. Our firm is focused on mission-driven design. We work in 3 areas: affordable supportive housing, education, and community projects. Our projects create high performance, healthy, and resilient environments, all on tight budgets. Next, a few examples. The Edley Apartments we recently completed, and this project provides supportive housing for both unhoused veterans and low-income families in San Francisco. Next, at the University of California at Berkeley, the Jacobs Institute for Design Innovation provides flexible innovation labs for students and achieves a 94% reduction in energy use, again on a tight budget. Next, the Ed Roberts campus in Berkeley, California is a nonprofit center for the independent living and disabled rights movement, designing for social equity and integrating sustainable design and universal design. We believe that architecture is a social justice issue with a critical role in building strong communities and providing dignified and inspiring environments for everyone. Next, our third and final action, advocate for positive change. Next, architects are powerful advocates. Our office is involved in supporting several important initiatives. As Ed mentioned, the adoption of the Zero Code at the local, state, and national level. The electrification movement in California. Over 50 cities and counties in the state are committing to a fossil fuel-free new construction. And finally, housing equity, a big and important problem in San Francisco and throughout California. We're helping to support advocacy and policy, ballot measures, and tax credits based upon performance. Next. So architects really need to be activists and to be citizen architects, and we can have a profound influence beyond the property lines of our individual buildings. We need to meet with government leaders. We need to be active locally, regionally, and globally. Architects and designers have an important opportunity and a profound ethical responsibility to apply the transformative power of design to help lead toward a carbon positive, resilient, just, and hopeful future. Next. So we must all reset to carbon positive, and we must reject the status quo. Thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Keith.
Great, thanks, Marsha. It's really great, really excited to be here. I'm representing LPA Design Studios. It's a great opportunity to be part of this this conversation today. Next slide. A little bit about us. We are an integrated design firm, so we're not just architects, but we're also landscape architects, interior designers, and we have a full complement of engineering disciplines under one roof. As you heard from Carl, we are 420 professionals strong. We are spread across 6 regional studios in California and Texas. And we have a diverse practice area. We do work in commercial workplace, education, healthcare, civic, sport and rec, as well as mixed use. So a lot of different project types. The reason we're here today is because in 2018, we were the largest firm to reach the 70% energy reduction threshold set forward by the 2030 commitment. And then we followed that up in 2019 by reporting a portfolio of showing a 73.2% reduction. So those are great numbers. They're numbers we're really excited about, but there's work to be done. Just like Marsha said, right? If the ultimate goal is carbon neutrality, we have to continue to evolve and continue to refine our process to hit those higher targets. This is something we've been doing for a while. We've always believed as a firm that sustainable design is good design, but we first started to establish firm-wide targets back in 2004, and we set those in relationship to California Title 24's Energy Code, just because that's the status we've had. And so we've been able to evolve into the 2030 commitment and add additional rigor that framework provides. So our hope today is to share some of the key points that have been important in our development, that maybe there's some value for all of you as you achieve your own goals. So next slide. The first point we wanted to start with, and Marsha mentioned on this too, I thought it was really great to talk about empowering project teams. we made a conscious effort that if we were going to achieve sustainability of scale across an entire organization, that we really needed to put the sustainable knowledge into the hands of the project teams. Our project teams are the ones that are client connected. They're the ones that are best situated to align our clients' values with project goals. And they're in the best position to set targets, track progress, understand results, and share those results back so that we can continue, strive for continuous improvement. Next slide. Next slide, please. Perfect. But that comes at a cost, right? To put all that knowledge across a diverse group of project teams means we had to invest in our people. We had to provide training and education to give them the tools they needed to be successful. And over the years, how we train has become different. We found that it's become more targeted and more timely, that the training happens in smaller groups, and it's also aligned with project schedules so that training can be applied directly to a project to get the most benefit out of it. Another thing we talk about, especially when talking about ideas that we're trying to spread across the entire firm, is we talk about our institutional memory. At LPA, our institutional memory is 90 days. If we say something in January, we have to say it again in April, we have to say it again in July, even October, until we start to see it in our projects. Next slide. So being an integrated firm, we support an integrated design process, obviously, but we don't always work with our in-house teams on every project. A lot of times we're working with outside consultants, we're working with consultants our clients have brought to the table, but that process, that integrated approach travels no matter what the team structure is. We believe in bringing everyone together to the table early on, clients, builders when possible, all the design disciplines, and co-authoring goals, really establishing what's going to define success and build consensus that we're all heading in the right direction. And once gathered around that table, we work really hard to foster an atmosphere of mutual respect. It's really important that everyone understand that a good idea can come from anywhere, and that no one takes such a level of ownership that they close themselves off to a new idea. Next slide. So one thing, it kind of, as we transition from our firm-wide goals based on Title 24 into the 2030 commitment, is the framework provided an added rigor and strengthened a process we had started about setting targets, tracking progress, and sharing results, and creating a feedback loop that allowed us to continually feed the next project with new information and new lessons learned. To do this and to get the most out of it, we've really promoted a sense of transparency where we share project data on all projects with our teams. Projects that maybe missed the mark, there's lessons learned there that other teams can avoid, pitfalls to be avoided. Teams that exceeded expectations, there's lessons learned there that we can apply what we did right into the next project. This last bullet is something we just added recently because I think especially in these crazy times that we find ourselves in, it's really easy to roll from one project deadline into the next and not take that moment to really acknowledge a project well done and celebrate success. But we found that's really critical. It helps us take a pause, acknowledge those things we've done well, and build momentum that carries us in to our next efforts. So next slide. And then our final point, when Carl we had some great dialogues leading up to this presentation today, and when Carl prompted us, he said, talk about how you've changed your practice, talk about how you've changed how you engage your teams and your clients, and talk about how you've changed about your work and how you talk about your work. But I think there's another aspect that we've seen, a change that we've seen, and that's in our culture. And our culture as a firm, we've really been able to connect building performance to design excellence. It's understood here that building performance is going to be part of the criteria by which a project is going to be judged. And we've got great top-down alignment. Dan Heinfeld, our president, back in 2004, set us on this path. Our great leadership team has come together and aligned behind that. But there's also this expectation, this understanding that we have bottom-up accountability. Anyone on any project team can take a moment, raise their hand, put the brakes on and say, I don't think we're doing what we said we're going to do. Or I think we need to course correct because we're not going to hit our target. And that two-way dialogue has been immensely successful for us. And that culture is key for what we're talking about. If we're going to achieve the goals of carbon neutrality, if we're going to really move the needle, we really have to be talking about all our projects, not just the projects that are pursuing a certification or not just the projects that are achieving an award. We really just have to talk about no project being left behind. So on our final slide, just want to say thank you for the opportunity today. I hope you all find today's content really inspiring. I know I think it's off to a great start. But if you want to learn more about us, we encourage you to reach out. You can reach us at carbonneutral@lpadesignstudios.com. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thanks, Keith. And we'll go ahead and turn it over to Rives then. Rives, you ready to take the screen?
Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Keith, and thanks, Marsha. It's really exciting to be here. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants with the two presentations you've just heard, kind of at the scale that you heard about and the scale I'm talking about. I'd like to take maybe even the next step up, building on the partnerships, the collaborations, the advocacies, the celebrating successes you've just heard about, and talk, yes, a little bit larger scale. Carl mentioned the Gensler Cities Climate Challenge, and that's really been for the last year a real motivator for us. It's been about different scales of opportunities and different scales of impact. Just this morning alone, I started with a conversation in St. Louis, followed by a project in Abu Dhabi, another one in Singapore, something going on in London as it relates to Europe. The idea is to take what you've just heard and apply it to a very large firm, but more importantly, thousands of clients and billions of square feet of practice a year. Next slide. Now, the Gensler Cities Climate Challenge really wants to focus not just on the scale of our firm, but advocacy across our 50+ offices. You can see the scale that we are, and I mention this simply because every square foot counts, and that's the conversation we have across the firm. That's the conversation we have with every project. We believe that getting the clients in this journey with, we hope, many projects to take those steps toward the 2030 commitment is very important. So there's never perhaps a home run, but lots of doubles and triples. Next slide, please. Slightly dated, though, the Impact by Design publication, which came out at Earth Week this year, right in the middle of the pandemic, documents our increased impact. Every year, about 1.5 billion square feet in full economic times of what we design or touch each year. We are measuring and looking at the energy reduction baseline, as you heard from Marsha. Her firm has gotten further along, as has Keith. Our general benchmark across our projects, and we do measure every one of our plus or minus 7,500 to 8,000 projects a year, is about 46 to 50% reduction, which we do the math and we find that it's a fairly large offset or reduction of the carbon that would come naturally from our owners' projects. So this first focus, by the way, is very much on the operational energy, about which you've heard a good bit too. Next slide. This presentation, by the way, is one that we really wanted to share externally, but spent a lot of time in the first 9 months or so, in the last year or so, really getting our teams across the globe to understand their impact. I want to emphasize that. The communication that you've heard from Marsha and Keith, that's very much what we have to do every day. The 90-day memory that Keith noted is very much, I think, our business, how fast things turn. You can see that in the scale of what we do, about 2/3 or almost 80% of our projects are connected to core and shell. And our interiors, which have an interesting footprint in and of themselves, represent another large percentage of what we do. So we mix not only the inside and outside, which is our business, but also the different kinds of projects, from schools, not-for-profits, but also office buildings. We also, in talking to our teams and making sure that there's a consistency of vocabulary, much of this for the folks on the call globally who are watching Mr. Masria's effort here, we know this, but we have to remind folks how impactful our practice is. Next slide. We also need to remind them, next slide, that we also have the opportunity to satisfy our clients who perhaps are already on that journey. Here's some example of, I think, not only very visible consumers of the built environment and clearly purveyors of services to us as global consumers, but also these are major clients of ours that have been very clear about their targets for the 2030 commitment. Again, reminding our teams that this isn't something that our clients aren't aware of, but in fact, it behooves us to step up, and not only respond to and enhance their targeted approach, but bring new elements to the table. Next slide. What that means, by the way, is that we also take the advocacy role. A year ago, roughly this month or this week, our co-CEO, Diane Hoskins, at the invitation of the UN, was part of a plenary session reminding the globe that the built environment, again, what we're talking about today with Mr. Masria and the wonderful speakers we've heard so far, is we now recognized how impactful that built environment is. And our goal with this Gensler City's climate challenge is not just the carbon focus, but in fact, all the climate focus. And that does entail not just climate impact with our designs now, the climate mitigation necessary for the challenges we face. I live in Houston, witness the hurricanes close by. It's also the social impact, the health impact, and the inclusive design impact that you've also heard from both Marsha and Keith. I mean, that is a focus we have, and we believe we need to remind our community with leadership examples like this regularly of how important it is to collaborate for that end product. Next slide. And really what the remainder of this presentation is how we communicate internally and externally with my few minutes here. Not only are we targeting a clear goal, setting clear aspirations over the next 10 years and setting for targets of performance and success, next slide, but we also are trying to give very simple approaches, how we design in terms of our clients using the buildings, the stuff of the buildings, where we locate the buildings, and how we encourage transit or other means to reduce the commuting impact. All four of those, we believe, in every project needs to be addressed, whether it's at a scale of an interiors project with its materiality focus to perhaps a brand new city in parts of the world that need better, more healthful communities for living and amenities and learning. Next slide. You've seen this before and very much appreciated the previous conversation with Mr. Waugh of Architects Declare. It's the reminder of how much of an impact our designs and the operations that are coming from our designs have. Next slide. It's reminding our teams of the impact, but it's also reminding our teams, reminding our consortium of consultants and perhaps contractors how important it is to make decisions early in the process. For the raft of project types that we have, very important global projects, again, similar to what my predecessors, Marsha and Keith showed, it really behooves us to start with a strong end in mind. We call that the design purpose of the project. And really the impact in early design, we're trying to coach our teams to have that focus from the inception. Next slide. And so the idea of 5 simple strategies that we have shared across the globe about build only when we need to, build only as much as you need, the climate focus, work with the sun, making sure that your north arrow is clear in your design process, use less stuff and use appropriate materials. 5 simple start of project conversations we might have. Lindsay, if you just go for the next couple slides rolling through it, we explain it. Again, I'm not showing this to folks that on the video that don't know this, but it's the idea of any of our projects, as for instance, Marsha was showing some projects that talk about efficiency of reusing buildings or looking at the idea of optimizing our designs, or in this case, an upcycle project in Austin, recently recognized by the AIA Committee on the Environment, or build only as much as you need, programming for a particular project in the New York area, a much larger building that when we asked the question of programming and approach, could we reduce its size, which of course, as the next slide shows, just by reducing the slide, you could in fact make a massive difference. Just asking the questions at the inception of how big does it really have to be? Again, reminding our teams through data and through examples, case studies, as I think Marsha showed, really an effective approach. And then, for interiors in particular, how can you be smarter with the materiality of the project? Identifying where you need layers or don't need layers, or looking at optimization through design for disassembly or rearrangement rather than waste. Next slide. And then, of course, the conversation about bio-based materiality. A number of banks, in this case, across Texas and Oklahoma, that are looking at mass timber and other rapidly renewable or rapid growth materiality that the client came to embrace as their brand, as part of what they could share with the community, becoming, if you will, advocates for this smart approach. And I do want to address, because it's a continual conversation about which we no doubt will talk, invariably is, well, doesn't this stuff cost more? Isn't it about more expense? And I think with the case studies and the presentations you've seen already this morning, but also with Keith and Marsha, the idea is it doesn't. It's about smart design. It's having the right team members here. And we regularly have to make that clear. Next slide. We have examples where we've done surveys with a variety of our clients, and again, invariably it costs too much to do sustainable, much less net zero buildings. But in fact, there's an equally data from the last almost 15 to 20 years that starting strong with that integrated design that Keith emphasized is really very, very important. And we think, in fact, we can show with a number of our projects that's not the case. One of our net positive projects here in Houston, Texas, and one of the most challenging climatic areas you've got, Houston Advanced Research Center, a little project with a very tight budget and a tight schedule. We're able to make it a net positive project before we added the PVs. I'm sorry, after we added the PVs, but beforehand, we were in that 12 plus or minus kBTU per square foot per year, and we were able to bring it in at 10% below market construction rates through a good and integrated design process, and with obviously a very aligned partner in the client and the constructor. And so once again, it's important, as you've heard, and I'm just emphasizing how to have the conversation with your teams, your consultants, aligning with clients and with your community. We really think by starting early and aligning with our own footprint and having that advocacy you've heard about from my two colleagues, we really do believe that this is a definitely possible process and definitely possible outcome in the 2030 timeframe. Thank you very much. Back to you, Carl.
Well, thanks, Rives, and thank you also, Keith and Marsha. And let's everybody put our screens back on, turn your videos back on so everybody can see you all. Well, again, thanks for the terrific presentations. All of them were really great. And I do kind of got the sense from they really did build on each other. I'm going to kind of pick up where Rives left off, and that is, all of us are trying to deliver this through clients in collaboration with lots of people and so on. There's a heavy bar to be lifted in a lot of cases here. How do you talk about the associated benefits to climate action? How do we really turn this into a positive conversation with our clients particularly?
Who would like to raise the bar with that? I think, really very quickly, with the diversity of clients we see, we've divided years ago kind of how to have that conversation with a client, a gauge through your homework before you even meet the client, obviously checking body language, who the client brings, and often the C-suite has one idea and the project manager has another. But the idea of there's a total embracing client, let them go. There's a client that just needs a little bit of a push. There's the client that's done their homework but really needs to be coached, and give them that time and respect. I think Keith, spot on. Everybody needs to be respected at the various journeys. And there's a client that probably will say no, but who's going to say no to success, whether it's saving money on energy or a better brand? So, there's no negative. It's, can you nudge it a bit along? But it really does take an assessment and I think an affinity and an empathy to understand what's possible on the client side.
I'd add to that too. I think there's an opportunity, Carl, right now with the heightened awareness of health and wellness and safety. It seems like the conversations we're having about projects today, that next logical step that we're going to protect people, protect lives, it's just kind of a natural transition to a bigger scale that we're also going to use our projects to protect the environment. So although times are really challenging, if we were able to make that connection on a broader scale, that would be a huge step in the right direction.
I'll just add to that briefly. Our client base is a little bit different than the other two firms. We work mostly with nonprofit organizations, and they're all long-term users as opposed to our shorter-term development model. But I think one of the most effective ways that we have found to talk about it is through health and now resilience. As Keith mentioned, protecting, of course, is an important thing that architects do by our buildings. But I think the health and wellness is really a powerful thing that we can tell our clients about. I'm sitting here in California with an orange sun at midday. Power outages are predicted. Rolling power outages and terrible air, I'm sure that you've all heard. So I think it's really important to understand that with extreme heat, wildfires, and an uncertain power grid, that these sustainable design features are really critical in terms of promoting wellness for the people who use our buildings with efficient mechanical systems, with HEPA filters, et cetera. Having renewable energy on site that can be counted upon in emergencies and be, again, a place of resilience for the most vulnerable people in our communities. These are all really powerful things that buildings can provide, and clients really get that.
So because we have such a great spectrum of firms here, I'm also curious about kind of answering the same question kind of on the staff level, like within your organizations. Clearly, you're kind of creating this, this very strong sense of mission, and all three of you really communicated strongly this sense of mission that comes with climate action. But then you've really got to get your staff to sort of have buy-in and then also be empowered to act on it. And the three scales of your firms are a great spectrum. So Marsha, where you literally know the names of all the people that work in your office, and I would challenge both Keith and Rives to be able to say the same thing. Obviously you're able to sort of make a personal, professional to professional connection with that. So how do you sort of communicate that mission to you in your firm?
Well, I think people who come to work with us really are already, well on their way to being missionaries, as we like maybe we could call them. So I think that, our office really is structured in a horizontal way, in an open studio, in a team structure. And so we try to have a team champion that really is the person who watches and make sure that we stay on track. And I think that poster that I showed, that we have each project team put together, just so it's always transparent and up in our office. I got to say, working remotely is very challenging. We've been doing it for 6 months now. And so I think as everybody, we're feeling a bit Zoom fatigued, but I think we're maintaining that commitment on every project, having champions on every project, and just making sure that we continue to push our work forward, educate our staff, keeping them engaged and involved in other activities such as the AIA Committee on the Environment and other activities in our profession. And all those things just help for moving this forward and reaching the goals that we want to achieve. So
Keith, how do you do that across multiple offices?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think alignment has never really been a challenge for us. Maybe it's the way we message, maybe it's the way we recruit, but when we're first talking about bringing people into the firm, it's very clear that sustainability, building performance is key to what we do and who we are, and people who are interested in that tend to migrate into our firm. So the alignment is less of an issue. It's more about what we talked about, empowering our project teams and building that fluency across 6 studios and building that fluency across 420 professionals. That takes an orchestration. There's a team here. We work on the curriculum of what we're going to lay out for our firms from an education standpoint every year. And it takes effort, it takes resources. And that's why we didn't want to tread lightly on the fact that as an organization, we had to make an investment to do that.
And then Rives, how do you do that across 6 continents?
Well, it started when Art Gensler created Gensler a while back, over 50 years ago, a constellation of stars. We're all going to be successful if we work together. There was also the recognition, and he loves to talk about, the rubber band, moving the client slowly, not snapping and breaking the rubber band, but slowly stretching it. What that means is, our different teams need to see paths to success. To be just a sustainability leader in our firm is not the end goal. It's really to apply it, whether you've got a client relation. We call them practice areas, where you're focusing on different project types. In the future, we see more of the embedded, passionate people, whether they focus solely on resilience, as we call it, or sustainability, to the exclusion of good design. And so really we're trying to embed it in the everyday. It is a culture shift. It is a behavior shift, particularly, shall we say, in the disparity of perhaps some of our educational institutions and how they value, whether you recruit the best and brightest or look at means to educate internally, we're trying to find the right balance. We have, in a lot of our resilience leaders, men and women who have been at it for 20 years. They are very, very passionate. They are very much about the metrics and the data and the coaching, but really the diversity of who we are means that we have to approach it in very different ways, whether it's, as noted before, focusing also on the wellness, focusing on the inclusive design. We believe there's a lot of embedded nature, and that takes a lot of coordination and or support, and in a lot of ways celebrating success. I really like Keith's point. Celebrating success often makes the shift because people see the value to their clients, their communities, their own career by seeing that level of success. And the net zero conversation, from materials, the choice of site, the operational energy through, say, simulations of our design, really have driven a lot of people to say, I can succeed in doing this. It isn't some abstract concept, making it real.
So the clock on the wall lets us know that it's time. So thank you, Marsha, Keith, and Rives for this terrific session. You've shown the importance of architectural practice in really getting the ball rolling on climate action. With that, we're going to conclude the architecture designing to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Pleasure working with you. Thanks again, Carl, and
Thank
Marsha
you.
and Keith. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very
everyone.
much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.